So a little bit about Local Immigration Partnership. We really do aim to strengthen the role of local communities across Lanark and Renfrew counties in integrating and serving our newcomer population. Local immigration partnerships are funded by Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada, or IRCC, which is a department of the Government of Canada, and supports communities in bringing together service providers, settlement agencies, community groups, employers, and other key municipal organizations to create a welcoming and inclusive community for newcomers. Today's focus is very important as research shows that rural Canada has a higher unemployment rate than the national average, and it also faces significant labor shortages, particularly for skilled workers. Statistics Canada's latest employment figures reveal that labor shortages are growing, even more acute in Canada, and providing foreign nationals with a tremendous opportunity to immigrate to our country and to gain their permanent residency here. Before we welcome our speakers today, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that Local Immigration Partnership of Lanark and Renfrew County is situated on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Algonquin people. Local Immigration Partnership is working towards reconciliation, and this acknowledgement is just a small reminder of that larger commitment. With this in mind, we respectfully thank the Indigenous peoples for hosting us on their ancestral lands. Miigwech, thank you. With those thoughts shared and a willingness to learn, let me properly introduce today's dynamic speakers. Canada-USA Work Permit is headed by Marc-Andre Ranger, a senior immigration paralegal and tech entrepreneur. He works with teams of experienced lawyers, paralegals, and consultants from across Canada on a consulting basis exclusively instead of traditional and more expensive flat fee rates. This platform is designed to help companies reduce costs associated with applying for visitor visas, work permits, and labor market impact assessments. We're also joined by Matt Penney of Mind Consulting, and Matt is the line of communication between employers, foreign workers, and the government to get labor shortage solved. With 20 years of experience in the private sector, Matt has experience in management consulting, team building, professional development, strategic implementation, and company collaboration. I'd like to formally welcome Matt and Marc-Andre.
Great, always good to check. All right, so thanks for joining everybody. Us here at Mind Consulting, what we do is we help companies facilitate and make a streamlined process for the temporary foreign worker program, which is one of the most essential and easiest ways to apply to reinforce your workforces and address the labor shortages companies are experiencing in the Canadian markets these days. So, oops, sorry, we skipped, there we go. So that's exactly what we do. We provide a full A to Z service for employers. So we can fit into the process at any stage. Perhaps you're an employer that's never experienced or needed a foreign worker before because you've always found your staffing needs domestically. So what we do is we can help fill in from the very beginning and introduce the whole system to a company and show them how easy it is to follow the process, and give guided advice with Marc-Andre's expert help as well. We can also, we come with a database of candidates, so we can also provide companies who have internal processes in filing for the work permits and the government applications. We can also help supplement you with available candidates that we've already vetted and screened that would have high likelihoods of being accepted into the programs for Canada. So our global footprint right now for our recruiting spans 4 continents and about 10 to 12 countries. We work with many visa-free and visa-required countries. What that does is it also helps employers have a flexibility of, especially as we're seeing in COVID now, certain countries can have travel restrictions put on them from one week to the next. So it's good to have a company like ours where we can pivot to another market to pick the candidates from that won't affect or delay the process you're going through with the Government of Canada for the permit approvals. So just some fun stats. Jody mentioned it on the introduction here. What we're seeing these days is a pretty acute issue with the labor markets. Pretty much in every major industry across Canada, we're facing a growing labor shortage. Most of this, many different factors are tied to it. What a lot of people have the impression of is that this is a COVID-related issue. But we will be seeing that this moves out of a COVID situation because it's actually more linked to the retirement age of the population of Canada. So in these factors, what you can see here, just to throw some of these stats and save us, you guys can, I think we'll be able to give this presentation out at the end. But we're facing massive vacancies, and these are shocking because some of these stats are only up to the second quarter of 2021, and the problem's compounded since. So in construction and manufacturing, you can see tens of thousands of jobs being unfilled currently. And again, we're looking, I think in the construction industry, the rough average is about 30% of the entire workforce is going to retire in the next 10 years. And we have nowhere near the enough students in trade schools and training programs and apprenticeships to take over for that drop in occupation. So again, the signal for all these stats is it's time to look outside our borders if you're having an issue finding the local recruits. We can look at the healthcare system. That's another one that's really badly hit. We're seeing shortages predicted in the tens of thousands over the next 10 years. Some of the biggest ones we hear about in the news constantly are nursing. We're also lacking a pretty big shortage of personal support workers, care attendants, hospitality services. So it really is a rampant across the industry, and their industry is expecting a rough 25% retirement in the next 10 years. We obviously have all heard in the news recently about the trucking industries and the issues they're having with short staffing. We don't really want to get into the vaccine mandate issues, but what it was is an issue before the vaccine mandates were even introduced by the government. So we were already facing shortages in these statistics of close to 20,000 per year up to 2025. And they're predicting, as well as construction, numbers in the hundreds of thousands of unavailable workers for open jobs. So we're really needing to start looking into the future and how we want our companies to grow and be able to meet the demands of different things in the markets, whether you're in production, meeting orders, providing a service. Growth can get stagnated for a business because of these issues. And then that's the Bank of Canada, seeing this, is now reporting that about 30% of businesses out there suffer from a staffing shortage, which isn't just a shortage, it's actually preventing them from growing. Sometimes a prime example I see a lot around our areas are when you see a Tim Hortons close in the middle of an afternoon from 1 to 5 because they just don't have staff to fill those shifts anymore. I mean, if you rewound 2 years ago and told people that it would be pretty commonplace to see fast food restaurants close in the middle of a day, nobody would have believed you. And that's the reality we're in right now. So we deal with restaurants who've told us during their busy season they lost about $40,000 a week by being closed on their 2 slower days. So the cost of vacancy is actually costing businesses so much more than actually exploring some new channels for your recruitment methods. So when we talk about a foreign worker, there's a lot of misconceptions and things of different reasons. So there's actually a lot of benefits to bring a foreign worker in for a business that address some of the other issues that plague our workforce challenges right now. We've all heard of the Great Resignation. It's a pretty common topic in HR and job placement companies right now. And it's that the labor market has become an employee labor market. So if an employee isn't happy with salary, working conditions, company cultures, or for a multitude of different reasons, we're seeing that it's very hard to retain staff that you currently do have, let alone attract new staff. So some of the benefits we like to highlight with the temporary foreign workers that really benefit an employer, many of these different issues they run into are the first one being a closed work permit. What this means is as a temporary foreign worker, the government's permitting the workers to work for a specific business. The reason for that, and Mark will elaborate on it more, it's called a labor market impact assessment. So when a business wants to bring in a foreign worker, they need to apply for a labor market impact assessment, which is a process to show the government that you've tried recruiting domestically and there are no Canadian workers to fill the open positions. The reason they give the closed work permit is because that LMIA was done for that specific business in that specific region. So the closed work permit doesn't prevent a worker from going and getting another job anywhere. What it does do is it makes them have to get another work permit in LMIA if they were to get another job at another business. So in most cases, you'll never have your foreign worker want to resign for a $2 an hour raise down the road because the process is too elaborate for them to do that. So that's what's great is you get the closed work permit for up to the length of their contracts. So usually they run from 2 to 3 years, depending on the skill sets and the median wages. And that will give you the ability to really foster and grow with an employee over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, for however long you need them. What's great with that too is then you can work towards getting renewals of the temporary work permits or even work into a permanent residency. So it's a great way. We say it's temporary. Their permit is temporary, but their potential to work here in Canada for the long term grows much higher with a dedicated employee that's worked in your business. So another advantage too is we hear this a lot in businesses, especially in where there's more skill sets required. We see this, a good example is healthcare, and they have an issue with probably finding entry level positions. So this would be care attendants, people wanting to enter into the healthcare industry. They have very little training or knowledge. When we look at them domestically, they are coming out of high school or other professions that didn't really attach to a healthcare degree in the past. So the employers are in a sense, if they're even able to find a domestic applicant for the job posting, a lot of the time the issues they're running into are underqualified people or people that would require a lot of training and a lot of upfront onboarding work to do. With a temporary foreign worker, the situation gets reversed. We find that from different areas, so again, this relates to where we work, so we can work with developing countries compared to the European countries. In the developing countries, you can actually get fully licensed registered nurses. We've gotten doctors who are surgeons that are interested in it and actually really excited about the opportunity to come work in Canada as a care attendant. Even if they understand that they may not ever practice medicine again, they might not ever be a doctor able to operate in an operating room, the benefit and the opportunity of getting to Canada to find a new life for themselves is much better than the life they had back in their home country. So we really don't find there's an issue with wage problems and things like that, because we pay them a fair median wage according to all Canadian labor standards. But if you look at so a good example again in the healthcare is a care attendant. A care attendant in Africa would be making about $2,500 Canadian annually. And when you offer them a job as a care attendant, that for a Canadian, it would seem like, a lower living wage, but at $25,000 a year for them, that's a huge opportunity to come live in Canada. So they also then have the ability to retrain to be recertified as nurses and different things. So if they're looking for the long term, this is a great employee to put into your business, because not only are they looking to bring their skill sets, and it works in trades as well. Trades, you might look for an entry level position and have very hard time finding anybody who's ever had experience swinging a hammer or working on a production line or anything of that sort. And then all of a sudden you can look into candidates that are 20 years of experience, 25 years of experience that are still willing to come over, because again, the opportunity is much better off for them than the opportunities they get in their home countries. So we can really work with an employer to find the skill sets they want, to match the salaries that they can offer, to match the working conditions that are required. And it really, we call it a win-win-win situation in our business. It's the employers win because they find highly qualified candidates, very dedicated to the job. And then the win for the candidates as well, because they're given this opportunity to try a new life in Canada and immigrate here. And then obviously a win for all the people that help them out in the middle, because it's just great to see our population growing and diversifying and supporting the economy as we get to go through these processes. And again, another point Jody mentioned in the intro, remote locations. So we do end up finding a lot of people interested in these programs have facilities or locations off the beaten path. So they're not near populated city centers. It's hard to find a skilled worker in an area where it doesn't provide much skilled workers, or you might have an older population of the area. You don't have a lot of young people coming out of college and universities. So with a foreign worker, they tend to not really be too picky about where the opportunity is in the country. So we always talk to them about it if it's really far away from a main city center, but almost every single time they will never object to where they're going to be located to get this opportunity. So it really gives an advantage again to companies where you have trouble or you're always working to relocate and paying the moving costs and different things and giving bonuses to try and attract better staff over to a remote area. With temporary foreign workers, it's really, really easy to place them in those areas that you have more trouble finding workers. And then the best benefit of it all is the diversified workforce. Study after study have come out in the years past that really testify that diversifying your workforce gives many more benefits than just its face value. You're going to boost productivity, increase employee morale, and it also aids in the future recruitment of domestic workers, because as our country becomes more diversified, even with immigrants and somebody whose parents were immigrants and they were born here, they feel much more comfortable accepting a job in a company that has that diversified workforce and diversified ideas and thinking. So it's really a way to strengthen your position for the future, to show people that you work with all kinds of different people from all parts of the world. And it really does, that collaboration of ideas really helps grow your organization as a whole. So just to touch on it briefly, we mentioned the A to Z service. So that's kind of what we do here at Mind Consulting, is we don't just provide candidates with Marc-Andre's partnership with us. What we do is we work in really becoming the experts for your company. So it can be very daunting, especially if you start looking into the whole immigration system. And to be honest, from my point of view, when I started in this business last year, it took quite a lot of learning to figure out the ins and outs of the whole market and to know what's allowed and what's not. And like Mark points out to us, if you make small little details that you think don't matter on an application to the government, they can actually turn your application away and restart the process. So you're delayed another 3 months. So it's really nice to work with a company like ours when you don't have any experience in the immigration system, you don't even know where to start. That's why we're brought into the picture. So we work with, we mentioned the global database. So an advantage to that is if you've ever worked with recruiters before, most recruiters, your company would hire them and they'll go seek the candidate, which puts a delay in the process. We have a lengthier process for an immigration, and we'll show it to you in the next slide. But what having the candidates available does is, while the permits are being filed, we can start pre-screening and presenting a short list of candidates. And then as the employer, you get the final interviews. So it's a really good way of having candidates that you know are ready to come work in Canada, that you vetted them and you know that they're going to be eligible for the work permits and have a higher likelihood of success. And then that leads to our candidate selection. So we work very closely with an employer to not just find out what the basic requirements of the job are, but what the culture is in your company, specific things that you guys might be looking for when you hire. If you have specific interviewing questions you like to ask the candidates, what we do is we do a pre-screening interview session with our large database, and then we'll bring the top 10 or 20 candidates for your job role. So you have the final say in choosing the exact candidate that you want to fit that role. We're just going to facilitate it for you to show you the best of the best. The other option is to, when working with us, is if we're given the right guidance for what you're looking for, we can even perform the final interviews and select the candidate for you. So we're really flexible into the way we work with employers. Next would become the job offer and permitting. Again, Marc-Andre is going to elaborate on these permit processes and explain to you what they are and the steps taken in them. But what we do is we really do all this in conjunction with the permitting and the job offers. So once we start an LMIA again is to start exploring the option that you need a foreign worker. And it takes some advertising, takes a permit. But during this permitting time, we can start getting your candidates ready to interview. We can do the selection of the final candidates. So once you have an approved LMIA, within the next day or two, we can be filing for the work permits. Another feature we can offer employers that really helps, again, a lot of our focus is on reducing the lag time in governments. We hear in the media lately about delays in the refugee processes, delays in the highly skilled workers. There's many different channels of the immigration process which don't relate to this. So those things you hear taking 1 year, 2 years are usually in the more people searching for permanent residency in Canada. What we're doing is helping filling a labor shortage. So what we do for the employers to, again, reduce that timeline is we can offer your onboarding training for if you have a new employee coming and you have to follow safety standards and procedures. things like that, it can be delivered remotely while the candidate's awaiting their work permit. In the trucking industry is one we really help out with. We help actually train them on the knowledge tests that the governments require them to take once the candidates have arrived. So we find candidates with the right experience to drive in Canada. The issue is just simply that their licenses aren't from a recognized country in most cases. And then what we do is they just have to take a written test and a road test again. So what we do is we help give them that knowledge before they arrive in the country. So we reduce the times of if you fail a road test and you don't have to wait 30 days longer to get the permit. So we really help reduce those kind of things and make the foreign workers more attractive for an employer, and take a lot of the work out of your hair in getting these candidates ready and prepared to arrive here in our country. And the final, sorry, I almost missed it there. The final step there is we handle and work with the employers to ensure the arrival is done properly. So we'll guide you through in things like accommodations, what you need to do, what you don't need to do, if you need to pay for travel or not. We cover a lot of those things with you. What we also do is prepare packages to help the candidates understand different things like our transport systems, our healthcare systems, banking, and things like that, how to set up simple things that we take for granted that when they come from a foreign country might not be so easily available for them. So to give you an idea of the process timeline here, the real process overall takes about 3 to 7 months. There can be at times delays to that. This is as if our system is running well. So we have sometimes delays like Afghanistan. We had the refugee crisis over there to help all the people that helped us get back into Canada. So when you run into situations like that, there can be delays in the immigration process, but at the same time, the temporary foreign worker process is one of the more speedier ones to get approvals on when you look at the LMIAs. So what we do is we work with employers to get the process as streamlined as possible. So usually we'll have meetings to talk about your needs, your requirements. We'll let you know at that time too, if we think there's a likelihood you'll be accepted for an LMIA, a positive LMIA we call it, because you don't want to get into this process to find out something wasn't done right, or you wouldn't be eligible for this in the beginning. There's also permit costs that are attached to these filings. So what we really do is help a business get an understanding of what their need is and if a foreign worker would match that need. Most cases, it is true that this would be eligible for a business. The only times we run into issues are part-time work, seasonal work. These are more permanent full-time employees for these programs. Then again, we work into the LMIA processes and things. Those take 2 to 6 months, depending on the visa-free, the visa status of the countries. At that same time, we take care of the candidate selection and the job offers you'll present to those candidates. So we help coordinate all these pieces at the same time. And again, if you're an employer doing it on your own, you might extend that process out to 12 to 18 months because you didn't get your candidates selected. So the LMIA was approved, but it took you 3 more months to find candidates, and different steps along the way like that can really extend and multiply that cost of vacancy. So if you're a business and you're shutting your doors for a day or two a week, you really want to get these people into the country as quickly as possible, where we aren't necessarily going to fix your immediate needs, but we can prevent these needs from happening again in the future. And from what we see in the labor statistics, this is an ongoing issue. If we don't look into the next year, 2 years, 5 years for how you're going to staff the business, you're always going to be left with your hands tied behind your back and reduce your productions, reduce your operating hours, reduce your deliveries because you don't have the staff to meet the demand. And that wraps it up on our side. So it's really about using a foreign worker channel in HR. We call it a value add to your business. We never look to replace the domestic recruitment channels. We're actually more favored if we keep trying to recruit domestically, where the foreign worker channel comes in as your backup, is your safety net, to make sure that you've always got a stream of workers coming in for your business year after year, and you can rely on these workers is the other aspect. So it's really working with us. We can help you design a strategy for the future. There's quite a few different ones. You can overstaff, we call it. So it's actually better in these markets now to overstaff your company by 1 or 2 positions because we can all assume that within the next year, you're going to have somebody resigning because they found a higher offer. They wanted to change career paths, and many different reasons why we're seeing people resigning from their employment these days. Another one is the unreliability of the industry itself. So when you have that extra worker, if you have somebody resign, you never end up being short-staffed again. You might pay a little bit more now, but when you factor in those costs of vacancies, what it costs you to not have that job filled later on, usually companies are coming out with a positive income on that proposal. So that's really what our goal is here. And I will kick this over to Marc now. And Marc's going to be great at filling in all the details on the work permits, the LMIAs, and different things I mentioned earlier.
All right, thank you, Matt, and apologize ahead of time if you hear me sneezing or coughing. So basically, I've been working as a paralegal, graduated from Quebec in 2000. Ever since, I've been involved in immigration, primarily in temporary immigration. So work permits, study permits. We were mentioning about labor market impact assessment. I'll get a little bit more explanation about that. But when we, so what's the difference between someone that needs a work permit and someone that will enter the country is just as a business visitor, is the notion of work as defined by immigration. So sometimes, over the past few years, I've had cases where people say, well, I'm just doing a volunteer work, or I'm just doing an internship unpaid. Generally speaking, those are considered entry into the Canadian labor market. So a work permit is required. There are a few exceptions to that process, but let's assume normally a work permit is required. Matt has mentioned about visa required versus visa exempted country. That is a major part of a work permit application, because it has a direct impact on the processing delays. It also has an impact on the acceptance rate. So if Canada imposes the obligation to foreign nationals to hold a visa before entering Canada, it's usually because of economic, political, social situation in the foreign country that Canada wants to basically have a review prior to allowing the foreign national. So whereas if you are from a visa exempted country, such as the United States, for example, or France, these people can actually secure the work permit immediately upon arriving into Canada. So just to give a practical example, if someone is from India, as we speak, we're probably looking at 5 to 6 months processing delays to get the work permit. If someone's coming from the US, depending on the type of work permit, we could apply on the same day at the land border or an airport. So it does have a significant impact. There is a 15 to 30 days work permit exemption that can be interesting to any company that only needs a worker for a very short period of time. However, it's limited to what they call skill level O or A. So basically jobs that requires a university degree or managerial jobs. So if you have a restaurant and you say, well, it's going to be a busy season during the Christmas holiday and I'm going to bring a cook, then you're not going to be able to use that work permit exemption. We can go on to the next slide, please. All right, so how does it go? So work permits basically are divided into two separate streams. We've mentioned about the labor market impact assessment, or shorter version called LMIA. Basically, that's a preliminary opinion that the employer or the representative of the employer would submit to ESDC, or Employment and Social Development Canada, to get an opinion as to whether allowing the job to be fulfilled by a foreign national or a foreign worker would have a positive or negative impact on the Canadian labor market. So that is a process that is done exclusively between the employer and ESDC. And that can take anywhere between 15 to 21 days, all the way to 4 or 5 months. We've been experiencing some delays lately due to the situation we all know. The labor market impact assessment are generally divided into between high wage and low wage. And what defines the high wage versus low wage is the medium wage of the province. So for instance, in Ontario, I believe it's somewhere around 24.10. So anyone making 24.10 or above would be considered high wage, and anybody making less than that would be low wage. And the main difference is the obligations that will be imposed on the employer. So low wage job comes with greater obligations on the employer side, such as assisting the foreign worker in searching for an apartment, an affordable apartment, paying for the round trip airfare tickets, paying for a medical insurance coverage for the period that the worker will not be covered by the public healthcare system. So those obligations are not imposed on the high wage. Quebec has something that we all wish would be available in the rest of the country. It's called the simplified process. So the province of Quebec recognizes over 100 type of occupations that are in high demand and for which they recognize there's a shortage. So they allow employer to bypass the obligation to advertise the job for 30 days and convince the government there's no Canadians. And quite frankly, it's been in place for several years, and it's quite a success. And hopefully in the coming months or years, the federal government or other provincial government will use that same process, because the normal path is the employer has to advertise for at least 30 days in at least 3 different job search engines. They have to basically have a chart of the resumes that they've received from Canadian workers. They have to justify why no Canadian workers were qualified for the job. So the Quebec simplified process removes all of that by automatically recognizing that there's a shortage. You have certain occupations that or sectors that for which that we cannot apply for an LMIA. So Matt, and that's something also hopefully the federal government would look into it. Matt was mentioning about the example of Tim Horton. If you're a Tim Horton in an area where the unemployment rate is 6% or above, which is right now the majority of regions in Ontario, then you cannot recruit a cook or a similar job. So despite having a 6 or 7% or 8%, many of these businesses are struggling to hire people simply because most people just don't want to work there. So so that's been an issue. If you are in a region, and yesterday I was working on a file in the Eastern Township of Quebec, the unemployment rate is 3.3%. So they are able to actually recruit foreign workers in these sectors. Because of the turmoil with oil in Alberta, most LMIs are not being processed there. Then the second option, which is a faster one, is the International Mobility Workers Program. And basically, it's an exemption to the LMIA process. So when a client would come to a law firm, seeking assistance with the work permit, the first step would be brought to look at whether we can find one of the LMIA exempted category because it's cheaper, it's faster. Someone was asking, relating cost of hiring a foreign worker. If you go under the labor market impact assessment, it's going to cost you $1,000 non-refundable for ESDC, then $155 for the work permit, and then $85 for the biometrics. If we apply under the International Mobility Program, then it's going to cost $230 to the employer, and then same fees for the work permit, $155 and $85 for the biometrics. So there's a difference in terms of the pricing. There's a difference in terms of how long it's going to take. And if you are from a visa exempted country, as we mentioned in the previous slide, and you are applying under the International Mobility Worker Program, you could literally take a plane, fly to Canada and get your work permit on the spot, or if you're from the US, drive to a land border and get the work permit right there. So it could make a difference between, again, if I take that example from India, if we were to apply for a labor market impact assessment and we need to advertise the job for 30 days, then we're looking at 30 days job posting, let's say an average of 4 months for the LMIA. So we're already up to 5 months, and then potentially another 5 to 6 months for the work permit. So we're up to 10, 11 months. If we were to go with the International Mobility Workers Program with a visa exempted country, we could get it within 24 hours. So there is a significant difference, unfortunately, and very often in practice, there is no exemption and we have to go with the LMIA. So as Matt was rightfully pointing out, sometimes it's better to be overstaffed, because if we were to go with the LMIA process, the worker might be here in a few months only. So you have to plan ahead of time your needs in terms of HR. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so thanks a lot. I know it's been a bit short on the immigration. The reason is there's over 80 different LMIA and LMIA exemptions, not to mention the business visitors. So it would be a university course on its own. So I don't want to board everybody with so much theory. Just bear in mind that we can, when you have a potential worker, or if you're interested to hire, you can always count on Matt and his team to help you find the employees. And you can always count on me and the lawyers I work with, so that we can tell you upfront how much it's going to cost, how long it's going to take, so that you can make a decision accordingly.
Great.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Marc.
much. So thank you again, Marc-Andre and Matt. And Marc-Andre, I know you're not feeling well, so we really do appreciate you being here today to share both your insight, your expertise, and your guidance. So now we're going to move on to the Q&A portion of today's session. So if you haven't already found the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, or if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand. But now is your chance to ask those questions. And judging from some of the questions that have come in, as well as some of the pre-submitted questions, the next half of our time together is going to be very insightful. So we will go to one of the questions in the Q&A tab to start. So do you work with employers who are coming to you? And do you also recruit employers, for example, in healthcare?
Yeah, actually, we work in both facets. So we are always open to companies who approach us. What we do, we recently joined the Orca Health Association, so the Ontario Retirement Community Association. We did a lot of outreach to their members. We're working with a lot of their employers now. So we kind of do it on 2 channels, but the bigger issue at heart is if I had a team of 100 salespeople, I probably wouldn't reach 10% of the employers that are in need of these services in Canada. So we always welcome people to refer. If you know of other owners of companies and things, refer them our way. Please don't wait for somebody to approach you. It's too quick of a moving market right now. So you're always best, if you have a need, reach out to us. Like I mentioned earlier, it's a very friendly thing. What we'll do is sit down and meet. We'll discuss what your needs are. We'll find out if there's a proper solution through these foreign worker channels. Like Mark and I said, most of the time we can find a fit for the issues you're having. But it's always good to consult with somebody before getting into the process. Like I mentioned, a lot of people rush into it. They don't really know what to request and how to gauge the wages and how to do the things properly. Mark's our expert at that. So we take the advice we know from him to guide you on the application, how we can get it achieved. And then when we get into the final processing of the applications, Mark takes over and handles all the details to make sure that cross your T's and dot your I's in this process, because you don't want to do it twice. You want to try and get it on the first try.
Well, I would add, Matt, that sometimes it's a matter of discussing with the employer. How long are you prepared to wait? What's the budget? I know some people are concerned about the relating cost. I've been working pretty hard to have everything digitalized so that it's we can expedite the case processing. So the way we work is With my firm, we take care of all the clerical aspects of preparing an application so that we basically give it to one of our lawyers that will only charge us for an hour or two to basically review the package. And what what does that is that basically, if you were to go to a law firm, you'd probably be expecting anywhere between $3,000 to $6,000 of legal fees to prepare an LMIA and a work permit. The way I work, handling all the clerical aspects with the technology that I've developed, we're able to provide the service for anywhere between $1,000 to $1,500. So it's extremely affordable. And when I began working 20 years ago, and it was mainly a business work permits of large law firm that were representing global companies, and they would do intra-company transfer. Now the mom and pop shops are recruiting because literally everyone at every level are facing difficulties. The main difference is sometimes the small companies, they're not educated on that process, and they see this as a big thing and a complicated one. It's not. It might sound complicated, but once you have someone like me, Matt, and the people we work with to guide you throughout the process, it's not really a complicated process. And I've seen it from my own experience, how it can turn around a business, because I used to be a partner in a firm in Montreal, and without the foreign worker, we would probably be out of business. Out of our 15 employees, 7 were on work permits because we were not able to fill in all the clerical jobs that we needed. And I kept telling the clients, the same problem that I'm solving for you, I have them as well as an employer. So feel free to reach out to me or Matt. Don't worry, you're not going to get an invoice. Usually what we do is we sit down, as Matt said, we look at, whether there's a fit. Do you prefer to go with the visa exempted? Are you okay with the visa required? And quite frankly, Matt was mentioning about, some countries who would gladly take a job anywhere in Canada. I always called it, the rich immigration versus the richer immigration. So the richer immigration, of course, people that come from industrialized countries with good standard of living, like the US, France, England. Sometimes they're not necessarily prepared to go to a rural area in northern Canada, for example. Whereas visa required country often will be prepared to do whatever it takes. So we're all going to look at that. What kind of jobs you need to fill? What's the wage? Sometimes the wage is actually below the medium wage that a Canadian can expect for that job. So we have to look at, are you prepared to raise the wages in the company? So there's several factors that we'll discuss before you actually get yourself into the recruitment. And another thing I'd like to address is sometimes people think, if I recruit a foreign worker and they have a 3 years work permit, does that mean I'm bound for 3 years regardless of the quality of the work of the foreign worker? The answer is no. The Labor Standard Act applies to foreign workers just as they apply to Canadians. You can fire with cause a Canadian. You can do the same thing with a foreign worker.
So piggybacking on the really great summary rather, Marc-Andre, that you just gave, let's say we had an employer who was looking to engage with both mine consulting for the recruitment process and you, Marc-Andre, for the fulfillment of the appropriate paperwork. Roughly how much would something like that cost for an employer for let's say one temporary foreign worker, or is there opportunity for there to be a package deal, if you will?
There is definitely an opportunity.
Actually, we do it as a package deal. Sorry, I was just going to explain. So yeah, so the way we work with Mind Consulting is Marc-Andre's fees and things are included with our service. So when an employer comes in through Mind Consulting to get that full A to Z service, we charge it, and it varies. So don't be wrong. What we do is a normal recruitment company will charge 20% for domestic recruits and candidates. we charge a 30%. We do have flexibility to lower that. So that's based on 30% of their first year salary. But that's like you just mentioned, Jody, if you're bringing one person, there's a lot more work involved, and Mark said it, when we get the process going for a company. So we work with a lot of corporate companies too that bring in multitudes of people, so we can lower those fees and find a more customized fee structure. And in that 30%, we do pay Mark for his fees and his legal services. And we also include the permitting cost of the $1,000 and the work permit cost. So you're getting those things included in our fees as well. And I'll let Mark elaborate. So that's if you wanted a full A to Z. But Mark's a much better fit if you already have a candidate, you know, maybe a friend of somebody who's still overseas, but their friend already works here in Canada. Mark might be a better fit directly for that in his system.
Yeah, generally, when I used to do these conferences, pre-COVID, when we do that in person, people would always say, it's all nice, Mark, what you have to say about the work permit. That's very educational, but how do we get the workers? And that's the part. I'm not a recruiter. It hasn't been my business. I work, with lawyers and within the legal industry. So, and before you start, pledging money into that process, might as well do a good due diligence as to what we're looking for. And then the advantage of a company like Matt and Mind Consulting, as you mentioned, is they have a large database of workers around the world. So we don't need to advertise the job and basically start the whole process. Large companies will do missions abroad. I've represented companies who brought in 30, 40, 50 workers. They will send their staff abroad. They will be there on site for several days. They'll go through all the resume. It's an expensive venture that small companies cannot afford. But I'd say right now, there's over probably 500,000 foreign workers in Canada on work permits. So it's not that complicated for a small business to be able to sit with the recruitment firm and basically start sorting out what are we looking for, what kind of salary we're prepared to offer, how long is that going to take. So what we try to do at the beginning, before you actually sign a retainer and say, I want to go ahead, is we want you to have a very clear picture of what that's going to entail, how long it's going to take, the risk involved also, because, for example, we could receive a positive LMIA and end up having a refusal at the work permit. The fact that a company is supporting a foreign worker does not necessarily mean that the foreign worker will actually end up with a work permit. So those are all the things that we need to discuss. The success rate versus the chances of failure. Sometimes a company will hire a little bit more workers than they actually need, thinking that they might actually end up with some refusals. So these are the things that we look at. And as I say, it's not part of the retainer, or there's no fees for that. Matt and me and the whole crew, we want employers to be extremely comfortable with, before they actually move forward with that. Quite frankly, I've heard, so many companies telling me that this is a matter of survival for them, that now I sense that most companies are prepared to go ahead with that. And it's going to get worse. I mean, I come from my mother, they were 18 kids. So, and then the next generation, mine were only 2. So the gap is just going to continue to get wider and wider. And, as Matt said, you get a foreign worker, they are obliged, or at least they have an employer restricted work permit for your company for 2 to 3 years. An employer restricted work permit means they are restricted to the geographical location. They're restricted to the employer, and they're restricted to the type of work that they can do. And any of these conditions that needs to be changed, we have to reapply. So you have some sort of security that technically the worker could go, somewhere else, but that employer will have to be prepared to do all of these as well. The other thing is the way the immigration system is designed. It's designed to maximize the transition between foreign worker to permanent resident, so you can actually potentially count on a foreign worker for the long run.
So another question that's come in through the Q&A actually relates to local immigration partnerships. So the question is how might a local employer get support in ensuring that their workforce is welcoming and culturally competent in integrating a temporary foreign worker? And so local immigration partnership is actually working with employers in Lanark and Renfrew County to provide support, training, to really assess what the intercultural competency is within your work environment, and to help guide you along that continuum, that growth continuum, to see your work environment and have confidence that your work environment is culturally competent. And so that's where we come in. And so I'll type a little bit more answer into the response with our contact information, but that's the role that we serve in our local community. And if you're not from, the person who asked the question, if you're not from this area, there are a lot of settlement agencies and again, other local immigration partnerships who would be positioned to help you to gain that confidence.
It's an important factor, Judy, because just to give you an example, I had an employee who had manufacturing plant in very small and remote villages in Quebec, and they brought workers from France, and they told me that they can't keep them because they get there, there's no plan to welcome them. It's basically, here's your work permit, welcome aboard, and that's it. And then they're all by themselves. They don't know anyone. There's no structure to basically help them, getting customized to life there. So he said, well, the foreign worker program is not good because I can't keep anyone. Well, that's because you're only looking at it on the first part, which is to get the work permit, but then nothing after when they arrive.
So another question. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was just going to add to that. Yeah, it's a great point on those things. And what we do with Mind Consulting too is helping with some of those things. You mentioned it, there's resources too. If you're in main city centers, there's the YMCA is a pretty common one who has a lot of those resources. And we actually, if you work through a Mind Consulting channel, you're going to actually get some direction on where those resources are for your area, some of the things to expect. Like I mentioned, we're also providing our candidates with little handbooks that kind of give them an idea of the Canadian, medical systems, bank systems, different things like that they might not have available in their countries they come from. So we really work with the employers before your candidates arrive to address those kind of issues, like Mark said, to make a welcoming introduction into your workforce, into your culture, and making sure that everybody's on the same page for that once they've arrived.
Can be as simple as getting a SIN number, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Another question that we had come in that was pre-submitted. Agriculture is a huge part of our local way of life here in Lanark and Renfrew County. And so do you have any recommendations then on ways to recruit skilled professional candidates? So you've already kind of touched on doctors and healthcare professionals, but from an agricultural standpoint, are there vets? Are there agronomists? Are there nutritionists who you've seen in your recruitment journey? I guess this is more a question for Matt, that would serve that agricultural community that we have here in the Ottawa Valley.
Yeah, absolutely. And the benefit too is, even though we usually recruit for main industries and such, that agriculture becomes a little bit of an if or that situation. The bigger issue is seasonal employment. We don't operate with too much. Your best resource is actually to reach out to your farm unions. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure what they are in Ontario, but I know in Quebec they have them, and it's they'll usually have a channel for exactly that seasonal.
Seasonal, Matt. Just to intervene, it's called farms. Mm-hmm. So farms provides workers to farm owner, and farms in Ontario and in the rest of the country manages the program. So generally, if it's for fruit pickers or these kind of jobs, you go through farms and they have lawyers and they have the whole system set up. So it's generally not a business that we're in. However, if it comes down to hiring, for example, the farm manager, or you mentioned nutritionists, or any professionals that surrounds that, then that definitely. But when it comes down to the the actual job in the crop field, you might want to check with farms.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
we'll end on this other question that was submitted too. So what piece of advice would you give to an employer who is about to hire a newcomer or a temporary foreign worker?
Well, the number one advice, and I'll divide that question in two. If you're wanting to hire a foreign worker that is already in Canada, contact me. Because the reason is we want to make sure that the worker has the proper work permit. And that is a situation I've seen way too many times, where employers hire a foreign worker that is here with an employer restricted work permit, and they think that because they have a SIN number in a work permit, it's all good. You are therefore in non-compliance. So sometimes if you want to hire a foreign worker that is in Canada, we have to do a due diligence. The other thing is sometimes you might want to hire a foreign student that is in Canada. They have some limitations as to the number of hours they can work per week. They're supposed to be full-time students. So again, there's a due diligence that needs to be done prior to hiring the worker. Same thing, the accompanying spouse have the right to have an open work permit. Sometimes there are some conditions. For example, sometimes they cannot work in the healthcare system if they haven't done a medical exam. So let's just speak so that we can do just a bit of a due diligence. If they want to hire someone abroad, then again, we're going to do a due diligence, but this one's going to be different. Is we're going to look at what's your motivation? How long do you need that worker? How much are you paying for? The foreign worker program is strictly regulated because the government doesn't want foreign workers. They don't want cheap labor. They don't want to see employers taking advantage. I'm sure that we could go to Africa and offer a $5 job to work at McDonald's, and that would be illegal because it's below the minimum wage, but I'm sure that person might actually accept it. So the government doesn't want that, and there's a due diligence that is done with the government, and we do that due diligence ahead with the employer to understand their motivation, why they want to hire, how long, and the budget they're prepared to put on that, and the efforts. It's not effortless. It's not a magical solution. It's something that needs to be taught ahead of time. So I would say if you're serious about it, and get in touch with us, let's discuss what you want, where you want, and then we can give you a much better idea.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll add to that we come across a lot, it ties that question before about us approaching other employers. We reach out to a lot of other employers who end up working, who are in the process with another consultant, and we don't mind that whatsoever. There's so much demand in this country. We're not a greedy company who wants to take all the clients for themselves. The one recommendation I do give to other employers: make sure you check out the backgrounds of people. The biggest issue we see, and most businesses don't even realize they're taking part in this scenario, but there's a lot of companies out there who will charge rock bottom fees, and then it turns out they're charging the candidates to apply for these jobs. So please double check where the money's coming from, because in situations, this is really what we as a company try to steer the industry out of, is candidates should never pay for a job to come to Canada. And that's why our fees might seem higher if you look into the market, but we've come across many different people in different professions. And then when we were exploring the options of working with us, they were telling us their fees, and then they would show us, and some of these recruits and candidates are being charged $20,000 loans to be taking the job in Canada. So please, if you are entering into this channel, you don't have to work with us. we just want to make sure that that's one of the recommendations I really strongly give to people is check the source of the candidates, if the candidates are paying any fees or anything, because the last thing you want to do is bring in a worker and think that everybody's done a great job and everybody's in a good position. And the candidates are actually afraid to tell the employers because they're told not to before they take the job. So again, this is a great program, a great industry, and a great avenue for your business. But if you're going to go into this, don't just take the first company you see and run with them. Really check into their background, check into how they charge their fees, check into their structures. Like Mark works with ImmiSight, he's got all the experience here. Find out where these companies are and really what they're doing with the candidates. It's our responsibility to help protect the candidates as much as our business is really follow the process, and you'll stay in compliance with the government and you'll have no issues with that. If you move a little too quickly and a little too, it's too good to be true, it's usually the case in these industries.
Well, it's Matt, I cannot agree more, because right now everybody is becoming an international recruiter. And, basically just like in the good old days when people would rush to Yukon for gold, they all think that, it's an easy business and it's easy money. And we've had cases, Matt can attest, where employers said, well, I didn't pay anything. I don't pay anything, but they're going to supply me with a worker. And then we start asking questions, where they're from, which program. I don't know. Well, it's not, the employer is supposed to be the one paying. Not the system like they have in UAE, where they bring people and they're stuck with loans that they need to pay back to sharks. The employer, and Matt and I and our team, we don't work with any employer that wants to work like that. The bill has to be paid by the employer, because in most Canadian provinces, to begin with, it's illegal for a worker to pay to get a job. And I also find it's immoral. So yes, Matt, good point. You do need to make a good due diligence with the recruitment firm.
Well, and on that note, before we close our speaker series session today, I do really want to thank both you, Marc-Andre and Matt, for your time and your outstanding talk. And I'd also like to thank our attendees for joining us today. We look forward to having you join us for our future speaker series session. So thank you. Merci. Miigwech.
Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you very much for the invite. Have a great day, everybody.
Yep.